A few days ago, somebody sent me a link to a YouTube video by a guy called Vinheteiro, in which he performs what he thinks are the top 10 most difficult piano pieces. He starts off with an excerpt from Liszt's famous Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, he continues with Korsakov's Flight of the Bumblebee, 4 pieces by Chopin including the Fantasie Impromptu and the Revolutionary Etude, Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 5 and the third movement of his famous Moonlight Sonata, surprisingly an excerpt from Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 21, and eventually he finishes off with one last piece by Chopin, the infamous Polonaise Opus 53. Now, I wouldn't consider myself to be a professional pianist, but, well, in a way I have studied piano, even if it was just for becoming a piano teacher and not for becoming a famous solo pianist, and thus I would attest myself enough knowledge of piano music to say that these are not the 10 hardest piano pieces and, in fact, are far from being the 10 hardest pieces of piano music. In this video, I want to explain why I think it's very hard to actually make a list of the 10 most difficult pieces in the first place, and then offer my personal attempt of listing a few pieces that might be considered to be hard. First of all, let's discuss the term hard. Why would a piece be considered hard? YouTube's own Vinheteiro gives the answer in the video description. The pieces are so difficult because they are fast, they have leaps in the left hand, they are polyrhythmic, they have octaves or even tenths, they have arpeggios, and other piano difficulties, whatever these may be. Now, all of the characteristics he mentions refer to technical difficulties in performance. Leaps in the left hand are hard to play because you have to have a good aim. Polyrhythmics are hard to play because both of your hands have to act independently. For octaves, tenths and arpeggios, you have to have a big, stretchy hand. What he misses here is the personal aspect that goes along with describing a piece as difficult. What one considers to be difficult is strictly connected to one's personal skill level when it comes to certain parameters. In my final piano exam, I played Beethoven's Piano Sonata Opus 90, which isn't particularly technically demanding, except for this bit of fuckery here, and yet it was a huge challenge for me, because I tend to struggle with keeping a solid tempo throughout the whole piece. I practiced for hours and hours with a metronome until I eventually managed to get a halfway decent tempo disposition. Other people playing this piece might struggle with other things, for example getting the articulation right in the beginning, the leaps in the right hand, or the chord repetitions in the left hand. Everybody will face different challenges whilst practicing this piece, and so everybody will consider different things to be difficult. Looking at the other videos in Vinheteiro's channel, the pieces he plays doesn't seem to be very difficult to him, guessing from the fact that his signature move is looking at the camera while playing. In the video featuring the 10 illegally hardest piano pieces, he isn't looking at the camera, evoking the impression of, these pieces really must be hard then. What if I told you that being able to play blindly doesn't make you a better pianist? I mean, imagine Lang Lang playing a concert in Carnegie Hall while looking straight in the faces of his audience. Wouldn't that be creepy? Well, personal taste, maybe you like his eyes or something. What I want to say is, difficult is a completely subjective feeling here. Maybe the video would be better off by being called the 10 pieces that I really want to play on the piano but can't because they are too hard, or the 10 pieces my piano teacher always warned me about. The next problem is a piece only difficult when it's difficult to play in technical terms? Aren't there other ways in which a piece can be difficult? In the lessons with my piano professor I've learned that there's more to playing a piece than just being able to play the notes printed out on the sheet music. Meeting the emotion, the momentum and atmosphere of a piece is as important as to transport the form, the idea and the history of a piece. This is why the technical difficulty doesn't equal the overall difficulty of a piece. Let's take a look at some more dimensions of difficulty now. What if the piece is notated in a strange way and thus hard to read and understand? Looking at this score from Mozart right here, it's very clear what the composer wants, as he gives us the notes, the tempo, the dynamics and the phrasing. But what about this thing? Before you can start to play this, you have to make an educated guess on what the composer actually wants from you. The difficulty obviously being that you have to get creative yourself and can't cross-check with the composer whether you've met his expectations. Probably not. Or what if the piece is extremely complex, like this example of Adrian Kleinlosen's piece Tönend bewegt from 2016? It doesn't feature any clefs or other markings, it doesn't even feature distinct notes. Instead, it gives you 6 staves of, well, something. How am I supposed to play this? With 6 hands? The rhythm is a complete and utter mess, the tempo markings aren't particularly helpful, and if you've earlier wondered what a polyrhythm is, here you go. I was pretty surprised that this sort of music is actually performable without a degree in advanced mathematics, and thus I would consider this to be pretty damn difficult. Kudos, by the way, to Hermes Theodorakis for playing this. What a legend. On that note, please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this is bad music in any form. I'm just saying that this piece is incredibly difficult to perform, and also, probably for the most of you, very difficult to listen to, as it doesn't feature anything to grab onto. There's no harmonics, there's no melody, there's nothing except for this mess. Let's take a look at another example piece here. Olivier Messiaen's Vingt Reger, a 2-hour cycle of 20 piano pieces with an avant-gardistic sound language, dissonant chords, a veiled, hard-to-catch rhythmic structure, and a lot of passage work that is extremely hard to play and memorize. One of the things that makes this piece so hard is the sheer length of it. Playing through 4 or 5 minutes of atonal music is already hard enough. When you have to do it for 2 hours straight, it becomes an exhausting tour de force. Unless, of course, you're really enjoying this type of music, then kudos to you, because I certainly wouldn't enjoy playing or hearing all 20 pieces in one go. Now, with the problem of subjectivity and the different dimensions of difficulty in mind, let's take a look at my list of 10 pieces that I would consider to be rather difficult. Before we start, please note that the pieces that I'm going to show you aren't presented in any specific order. Instead, it's rather just a non-hierarchical list of pieces that are very difficult for their very own reasons. Also, you are going to notice that a few pieces you might expect on that list are missing, including Liszt's famous piano rendition of Paganini's La Campanella. This is a piece that has become so famous that even Vinheteiro's viewers requested it in the comment section, and due to the fact that I merely want to show you music that you probably haven't heard before, I'm going to exclude this from my list. Let's start off with Exhibit A, Guido Agosti's rendition of Igor Strawinsky's Firebird Suite. Strawinsky wrote this ballad in 1910, originally for a big symphonic orchestra. The Italian pianist Guido Agosti rewrote it for solo piano. I'll let the opening speak for itself. Now, what is it that makes this piece so difficult? It's the task of merging a complete orchestral score featuring approximately 100 different instruments into just 2 hands. But not only that, the pianist has to make the piano sound like an orchestra, with all the highs and lows, the different colors and timbres, and the flexibility in sound generation. The Swiss pianist Francesco Piemontesi does an absolutely incredible job of managing this stacked pile of notes, chords, and rhythms, all that whilst keeping the connection to Stravinsky's original orchestral work alive. Let's listen to the ending. Doesn't that sound like a real orchestra? On to Exhibit B, Max Reger's Variations in Fugue on a theme of Johann Sebastian Bach, Opus 81. Reger uses an intimate melody from Bach's Cantata No. 128 and puts it through a remarkable series of variations. The difficulty here is not only seeing through the mountainous aggradations of notes, but also keeping the main theme recognizable in the intricate passage work and counterpoint that Reger is so famous for. Can you spot the opening theme in this furious part? Yes, it's in the left-hand bass notes. Analyzing a piece like this and understanding all the references within is a crucial part of being able to perform this piece. Add the immense technical demandings of the concluding fugue and understand that this piece is not only one of Reger's eclectic masterworks, but also really difficult to understand and perform. Exhibit C is another example of how ferocious and complicated variation works can be. Based only on the first few bars of Franz Schubert's famous Unfinished Symphony, Polish composer Leopold Godowsky builds an insanely complex Passacaglia. Godowsky's way of processing the very few notes that he chose as the basis for this 20-minute colossus is strikingly simple, and yet the technical demandings for the pianist are incredibly high. The pianist has to abduct the listener into countless diverse soundscapes whilst always keeping the sujet of the piece clearly recognizable. Short digression to the Erlkönig? No problem. Cadenza in 20,000 Q notes, why not? Fugue written out in 4 staves due to its complexity. Yes, it's Godowsky. By the way, this recording by the Finnish pianist Antti Sirala is one of my favorite recordings of anything ever. The clarity in the always recurring theme, the dramatic outbursts and the intimate moments, he nails all of it. Genius. Exhibit D is an extraordinary piece that I only just recently discovered while browsing YouTube. It's the first piano sonata of the contemporary Australian composer Carl Vine. Written in 1990, this piano sonata not only makes use of unusual piano techniques, such as controlling the overtone structure by pressing keys down silently and keeping the strings open with the middle pedal. What's really baffling about this piece is its rhythmic and tempo structure. In the introduction to the piece, the composer states that his tempo markings aren't meant to be suggestions, but indications of absolute speed. A rubato-esque approach to the melodies should be avoided where possible. Internalizing the absolute tempo markings without using a metronome in performance needs a lot of practice. Combined with a very complex polyrhythm in the exposition and the fast 16th notes unevenly divided into the 2 hands, this piece becomes even more challenging. The second movement is a relentless row of 16th notes played simultaneously in both hands, sometimes including bigger leaps that have to be performed strictly in tempo, and a lot of different, sometimes uneven couplets. Peeling the melody out of this pile of notes, together with the extreme dynamics and the fast tempo, this piece will most likely provide a lot of challenges, even for the best pianists out there. The next piece is commonly seen to be one of the most important pieces composed in the 19th century. It's Franz Liszt's famous piano sonata in B minor. During Liszt's lifetime, this piece had been widely regarded as a poor try. Even Clara Schumann, one of the most famous pianists of this period, referred to it as gruesome and blind noise. Today, the B minor sonata belongs to the standard repertoire of most professional pianists and is often performed in piano recitals. Alternating between furious sections of full chords and intimate, transparent melodies, the sonata takes the pianist from peak to valley, back to peak, all that while demanding a distinctive technique in fluency, octaves and balancing. Although Liszt illegally tried to move away from writing virtuosic pieces just for the sake of virtuosity, his early days still shine through in passages like this. Liszt's oeuvre isn't unfoundedly regarded as one of the hardest. Let's take a look at one of his early works next. The aforementioned B minor sonata marked a turning point in Liszt's life. He wrote it after settling down in the city of Weimar to become conductor of the local symphonic orchestra. Beforehand, he had lived the chaotic life of a piano superstar. He would tour around Europe, give hour-long concerts and please his audience with the two things they liked most: his pianistic virtuosity and well-known melodies from the most popular operas at that time. During his lifetime, he wrote approximately 40 paraphrases on different operas. These pieces would feature the most famous melodies brought to the piano in a very virtuosic way. One of these paraphrases, and probably one of the better known ones, is his Reminiscences de Don Juan, featuring 3 popular melodies from Mozart's opera Don Giovanni. Now, the interesting thing about these pieces is that they were meant to be difficult and virtuosic. They were written only to be performed by Liszt himself in his piano recitals to make a good revenue and to secure his role as a piano superstar. The Don Juan paraphrase makes use of the whole range of the piano. It has a lot of messy and difficult passage work, and the ending is pure insanity, played here in a jaw-dropping live performance by Japanese pianist Masaru Okada. Coming now to Exhibit G, Sergei Rachmaninoff's Piano Sonata No. 2 in B minor. At this point, I'm pretty much running out of things to say. Almost all of the pieces I've shown share their difficulties. They are long, they have many notes, complex rhythms, and are technically incredibly demanding. Rachmaninoff's second sonata makes no exception. The first few bars already feature dense chords, big leaps, 6 tuples in the accompaniment, a message change, and a theme in the lower register. I know that this recording by Canadian pianist Marc-André Hamelin probably isn't the best one, but it's definitely the one that makes the sonata sound most grandiose. His incredible tempo, combined with the dense textures, the crowded rhythms and the chromatic harmony, make his rendition one of the hardest to replicate. The tempo that he chooses for the last presto passage is incredibly chaotic, and my god, just listen to that last note. On to Exhibit H, Maurice Ravel's famous masterwork Gaspard de la Nuit from 1908, in which the composer puts 3 poems of Aloysius Bertrand into music. In order to understand the genesis of this piece, we need to take a look into Moscow a few years earlier, where composer Mily Alexeyevich Balakirev wrote something that the contemporary critics, especially Hans von Bülow, consider to be the hardest piano piece ever written. The piece is called Isla May and is inspired by a Circassian folk dance. It sounds like this. You can clearly hear the oriental origin of the melody, with a lot of note and chord repetition and a focus on the syncopated rhythm. Ravel felt challenged by that and wanted the third movement of his Gaspard de la Nuit to be even more difficult than Balakirev's Isla May. Did he succeed? The third movement comes with a number of difficulties: fast note repetitions, trills, big leaps, and keeping a transparent texture in a very quiet pianissimo surrounding is extremely challenging. In the middle part, there's just too many notes to catch a breath, and the ending is, again, pure madness. Exhibit I is something that might probably surprise you, but I've chosen it to be in this list due to its war effect. It's the solo cadence from Sergei Prokofiev's second piano concerto in G minor. Solo cadences have always been in solo concertos for the sake of the soloist wanting to show off and impress the audience. In the early days, the cadences were supposed to be improvised. Later, the composers usually wrote the cadences themselves, and so did Prokofiev in this example. The build-up of the cadenza is insane. It starts off with the main theme of the first movement, notated in 3 staves, because why not? It then slowly but steadily builds up to one of the most emotional outbursts in piano music. And, my god, when the orchestra comes in the end, pure goosebumps. On to the last example. As Exhibit J, I have chosen Alberto Ginastera's Piano Concerto No. 1, with a special focus on the last movement. While the whole piano concerto is extremely difficult due to its complexity, the weird rhythms, and the messy passage work, the fourth and last movement is a special case. While maintaining a rushing 200 beats per minute tempo, the pianist has to go through constant beat and feeling changes, alternating between 3/4, 6/8, and 5/8. Weird tuplets and the lack of a clear harmonic context to grab onto make it even harder. Keeping the syncopated rhythms in absolute sync with the orchestra is exceptionally difficult. And then there's passages like this. I've done some quick maths. This passage is approximately 5.14 seconds long. Number of octaves played in this time? 72. That's a mere 14 octaves per second. And then there's the ending. Let's start a bit earlier and enjoy all of it, such as this one guy in the audience does. Yep, that's it. That's my list of 10 piano pieces that are exceptionally difficult to play. I know that there's a ton of pieces out there that might have the same or an even higher degree of difficulty, but these 10 here belong to my personal favorites, and as I like to share music with people, they made it into the list. If you want to listen through the pieces that I mentioned, please find the links to the videos and performances that I used here in the video description. It's really worth it. Now, go out there and brag about your new piano knowledge. What about this? Next time, instead of asking your pianist friend to play The River Flows in You, challenge them to play the Liszt Sonata or the Ginastera Piano Concerto and see how they react. That's it for me today. Take care, like and subscribe, and have a good one. Cheers.